572. I may not be running at 100% tonight. I've been fighting over the last week or so a severe case of cancerous pneumonitis, a rarely known disease. I don't know what it is, but something. And it has really sapped my strength. So, but we will do our best this evening to cover this text and give it the attention that it deserves. I'm going to back up with our reading just a little bit if you'd like to follow along on the wall, John chapter 14, and we'll look at verse 5 through 14. Thomas said to him, make sure that's on, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does this work. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. This text has made the top whatever list of one of the hard sayings of Jesus, and it's not hard when you think about the text and examine it for just a moment as to why it is one of the hard sayings. We have described these texts as we've worked through them of, well, this one is hard to understand. You know, it's complicated. There's all kinds of issues and a lot of disagreement about it. And then other texts we've looked at and said, not really that hard to understand, but it's hard to do. You know, it just really asks a lot of us as frail human beings to do this thing. Well, the interesting thing about this text is it's some of both. It's hard to understand, and if you, depending on what your understanding is, most every understanding that's out there, it poses some execution challenges. It's hard to understand because if you'll think about it for a moment, how could you, mortal man, do a greater work than Jesus, the Son of God? I mean, and I ask that from a philosophical point of view. Jesus is the Son of God, the creator of the universe, the perfect man, the example of what it means to be a perfect man, Jesus. Okay, so Isaac, just run out there and do something better than Jesus did. Really? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do something greater than the greatest man that ever lived? How am I going to do that? Well, obviously there are some layers and levels of understanding here that I have to peel back to get it, because that can't possibly be the right understanding of this text, that you and I are going to go out and do more powerful things than the creator of the universe did. So that's the first thing. You got to work through really what is he talking about. The second thing is it's hard to execute. So whatever it is that we're going to do that's greater than Jesus himself did, yeah, that's not just a cup of coffee with your breakfast, is it? That's going to be hard to do. Even once I understand what it is, that's going to be asking a lot of me, whatever it is that I'm doing that's greater than what the Lord did. So the text is both hard to understand and also, depending on how you read it and how you understand what it is saying of us, it's going to be hard to do. As I think as we have to do, you've got to get the setting, and I believe the setting really helps understand in the case of this text. The setting is the Last Supper. The Last Supper takes up about 20% of the book of John. And if you factor in Matthew, Mark, and Luke and how much the events around that Last Supper take up, it's a considerable part of the account of the life of Jesus is given to us in terms of the things that happen at the Last Supper. So the Last Supper is a very important part of Christianity. A lot of what we know about Christianity occurred at the Last Supper. And this event is one of the things that happened at the Last Supper. Jesus has instructed them to go find the upper room. They've done that. They've procured this upper room. Now they're going to enjoy this last Passover before he is put to death. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of things talked about at this last Passover. They're going to have a lot of questions. And Jesus has a lot of, if you will, last-minute things to tell them. So it's a very important time, this Last Supper. Thank you, Mike. I am going to have that before this is over. So this text is spoken at the Last Supper. That's the first thing you got to know. The next thing that happened at the Last Supper is Jesus washes their feet. Now, I'm going to go through these things because you have to put yourself in the mindset of the apostles, the disciples, as to why they begin to ask the questions they ask. So I want you to think about what they thought Jesus was going to do. And I found that watching the recent movie theatrical versions of The Chosen have really helped me think this through a little bit. It's hard to get inside the apostles' head in great detail, but it's not real hard to know that they thought to some degree Jesus was going to conquer Jerusalem, expel the Romans, and set up the throne of David literally there in Jerusalem. They had some vision of that somehow all the things he had said, all the prophets had pointed to that. They had some idea that something like that was going to happen. So they ask if one sword or two swords is going to be enough. All the things we've covered, right? That all speaks to the idea that they know that Jesus is going to be miraculous in how he does it. You know, he's going to somehow do this in a great miraculous and powerful way, but in the end, that's going to be the final outcome. He's going to do that. Okay, that's what they think is going to happen. Now, for a few days, they've been sort of confused by the events because Jesus runs into Jerusalem, and the first thing he does make everybody mad by turning over the tables of the exchangers in the temple. And the things he begins to say and the going back and forth and all the events begin to confuse them just a little bit. But now they're at the Last Supper. Maybe he's going to finally help them see how this is all going to unfold. So the very first thing he does is exactly the opposite thing you would think the king that sits on the throne of David would do. After the Last Supper, he gets down on his feet, his hands and knees, and he washes the feet of the apostles. That is about as opposite of a thing as I can imagine the apostles would have assumed he would do. As a matter of fact, if you remember, Peter said, "What are you doing?" No, the king that sits on the throne of David is not going to wash my feet. And you all know how that turned out. So this isn't going the way the apostles might have thought it was going to go, right? He's washing their feet. What's that about? After that, then he gives the warning about Judas betraying him. Okay, wait a minute. This is the king, the Messiah, that's going to establish his throne in Jerusalem. And now you've got a traitor? One of your top guys is a traitor? That's bound to give them a little bit of pause. How's that happening? And yes, it was prophesied, but how's that going to happen? And then he gives them a new commandment. Now, it's not hard to debate this commandment. It's a great commandment. We love this commandment. It's so informative to us about what it means to be in the kingdom. But I want you to think about the apostles establishing a new kingdom in Jerusalem, a new throne. The Messiah has arrived. What's the thing? What is like the thing? That you love one another. Okay, all right, that's important. But I could imagine the apostles still sort of scratching their head a little bit like, shouldn't it be like, kill all the bad guys? Or something. Maybe that's kind of the thing they're thinking. We don't know for sure, but I can certainly see that the way this Last Supper is going is not the way they might have anticipated. And then Jesus foretells Peter's denial. Okay, wait a minute. This is the guy who announced that Jesus is the Son of God. This is the one who Peter, as one of our hard sayings, revealed, who Jesus says, by the way, Peter, I'm going to give you the keys to the car. You're going to have these keys. You're going to be the one that starts it. I'm being a little bit metaphoric in what I say here. You're going to have the keys to the kingdom. You're going to be the guy that opens it up. Okay, so Peter is going to deny. You can just almost, if you put yourself in that room, you can just almost feel the confusion coming on event by event as this Last Supper carries on. So Jesus perceives, John 14, verse 1, that they're troubled. Of course they're troubled. None of these things are, you might say, consistent with what they probably thought was going to happen. They're troubled. So Jesus says, let not your hearts be troubled. He perceived that they were troubled. They're confused. They're like, what? What is all this about? And he gives that comforting statement. My Father's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. Jesus gives the core of the answer he's going to give over and over and over again through the rest of these 3 or 4 chapters. I'm going, but my going will facilitate your growing. I'm going to the Father, and I have to go to the Father so that you can grow in what you're going to be doing in this kingdom. That's the essence of his answer. And it was meant to be comforting to them. They're confused. They don't know what's going on. Jesus says, I'm going to go, and in going, I will facilitate you growing into what it is you're supposed to do. So then Thomas asks a question. Okay, he's given us a comforting statement, and he says he's going to go. Okay, where are you going, and how can we know the way? Thomas seems to think that things aren't going to be right unless they can go with Jesus. Okay, Jesus, you're going. How can we know the way? How can we go with you? We got to go. I mean, you're the Messiah. We got to go with you. And so Jesus answers Thomas's question. And basically he gives that answer that we all quote quite often. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. It's not exactly the answer you get the sense that Thomas was looking for, but it was the answer he needed. That the way to the Father is Jesus. It's not a road. It's a movement, if you will. So that was that first question. Then comes the next question. Philip's question. Philip asks, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. It's essentially the same question. Jesus is going. Thomas says, where are you going? How are you going? I mean, what road are you taking? How are we getting there? And Jesus says, no, Thomas. I am the way. I am the truth. I'm the life. Nobody comes to the Father, which is Jesus where we're going, to the Father. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. So Philip comes up and says, okay, show us Father. Can you just show us this destination that we're going to? Jesus, this hard saying that we're looking tonight, is an answer to Philip's question. Okay, it's just that simple. Whatever this hard saying is about, it is an answer to Philip's question. Show us the Father. How can we get to the Father? How can we get to this place that we want to go? How do we get there? And how do we get to the Father in doing this? So Jesus answers the question. The question includes the hard saying, and I would tell you that any reading of this text that you walk away with that doesn't at least in some part provide a comfort to the disciples, you're probably reading it wrong. And let me explain what I mean. I looked at a lot of commentaries on this text, and I don't think I found any 2 commentaries that agrees, real consistently on what this statement means, this statement that Jesus makes about greater works, doing greater works. A lot of ideas out there, but not really a consistent, held opinion out there about what it was that Jesus meant. Well, let me just start with what I call the process of elimination. Any reading of Jesus' statement that does not answer Philip's question, that does not provide some kind of comfort to Philip and Thomas and the rest of the apostles regarding their state of confusion, and us by extension. Any reading of the text and any explanation of the text that does not accomplish that is probably wrong. Because that's not the conversation that's going on. That's the reason I went through all this. The conversation that's going on is you've got the apostles that are confused. They're troubled by all this that's about to happen. They don't know how this is going to play out. You know, they know that Jesus' life is in danger. They know that. How's this going to play out? They're very troubled. And Peter's going to deny, and Judas is going to betray, and and Jesus, the Messiah, is down on the floor washing our feet. They're troubled. Whatever Jesus is telling them is meant to help them get past their being troubled, get past their uncertainty about what's going to become of the movement of the kingdom. I think that's, to me, the simple answer is the best. That's the simple answer. Whatever Jesus is saying, it's meant to help the apostles and us understand the great things that happen in the kingdom and how that can be a comfort. Okay, with that in mind, there's a couple of key statements here that I think you've got to think about. I want to reread the text now that we've sort of set the stage, what's going on. Reread the text. I want to focus in on a couple of statements. Jesus said to him, his answer to Philip, "Have I been with you so long and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" If this was a Saturday Night Live skit, Jesus would be going, I've told you over and over, the Father's in me and I am in the Father. If you see me, you're seeing the Father. I and the Father are one. This has been a part of his message all along. Philip, how can you say, "Show me the Father"? I've been showing you the Father for the last several years, 3 years now. How can you say that? That's almost, if you want to make it funny, that's almost what Jesus is saying. How can you say, "Show us the Father"? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? In other words, he asked a rhetorical question. What, Philip, did you not believe all the things you've been seeing? Did you not believe it? Then he says, "The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works." Full stop. Pay attention to that statement. The words, W-O-R-D-S, that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works, W-O-R-K-S. Jesus associates the words that he spoke with the works that he did. And that'll be real important here when we talk in a moment about one of the misconceptions of this text. Jesus describes the works, the words that he spoke, as the works of the Father, and conversely, in other words, in opposite, the words he spoke, the works he did, the words the Father gave him. That's a very important part of the context of this statement. It's the Father working through Jesus, and he says, the words that I say to you, I don't speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Okay, very important to get that in our mind as we think about it. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father's in me, or else believe on the account of the works themselves. Works, words themselves. Jesus has used those somewhat interchangeably there. Now, the reason that matters is because there is a reading out there that says Jesus is only talking about the miraculous in this text. And there are two reasons I don't believe that's the case. Number one, he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me." Granted, John 14, 15, 16 is primarily addressed to the apostles, and a lot of what is in that context is to the apostles, though there are many statements there that apply beyond the apostles for certain. But Jesus very specifically says here, whoever believes in me, not just the apostles. So to limit this, the scope of this statement only to the performing of miracles would not be consistent with Jesus' statement, whoever believes in me. That's the first one. The second one is, Jesus is given the chance here to define what works means, and he does it. He defines works by using the word words. The words that I speak to you, the words that I say to you, are the works of the Father. Jesus is talking about, is the miraculous part of the scope of his answer? Yes, I'm sure it is. But it's a small part of it. The scope of his answer is much larger than that. It is whoever, number one, not just the apostles, and number two, in referencing his own works, he describes them as words, the things he said. Let me explain what I mean. One commentary I read today, a highly respected commentary, listed off some works of Jesus. And it listed off these works saying, which of these works would we fain try to do? And it listed off walking on water, raising Lazarus from the dead, a couple, two or three other miraculous things. Well, I would argue that what Jesus said here, the Sermon on the Mount, would classify more of a work that he is describing than raising Lazarus from the dead. Not that raising Lazarus from the dead wasn't a big thing, but Jesus is talking about the words that he spoke. And if you want to think about the impact of the Sermon on the Mount, this impact on the Sermon on the Mount changed the world. Arguably the most powerful sermon ever given. The first time anybody would ever say the kinds of things he said. Blessed are the peacemakers, things like that. The fundamental shift in thinking there at the Sermon on the Mount. That would be as much a work in context of this statement as, say, raising Lazarus from the dead. So that's my second thought about this. Any view of this text that sort of puts a funnel on it and says it's just talking about miracles, the miracles the apostles would perform, is wrong on two accounts. Number one, the statement, whoever believes, certainly eliminates that. But also, he describes the works, he defines the works as, at least in part, the words that the Father gave him. Okay. On account of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever, and we've talked about that, believes in me, will also do the works that I do. So what works did Jesus do? Well, he just told us it was words that he spoke. Now, he also performed works, like miraculous works, and the apostles certainly performed miraculous works. But I think the first thing we have to do is expand our understanding of what works means here. Jesus is talking about works in the broadest sense. The works that I do and greater works than these he will do. Now, there's two kinds of works Jesus is describing. The also works and the greater works. We will also do the works he did, and we will do greater works. Now, that troubles us a lot, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I just want to get that, as we got this text up here, get that in our mind, that he defines that, at least in part, as words that came from the Father. Greater works than these he will do, because I am going to the Father. That's the sort of the final thing that has to jump out and get you here. Whatever it is that Jesus is empowering us to do in terms of greater works is happening because he is going to the Father. Now, I want you to think about that, why that would matter in terms of comforting the apostles. The apostles are sitting there thinking, you're leaving? You're going? Where are you going? What road are you taking? How are you getting there? Oh my goodness, he's leaving. What are we going to do? And then when he dies and is buried, well, they all scatter. They go fishing. They're in a panic, right? That's what troubled them. They saw that he was about to die. They don't know, what are we going to do? The Messiah is dying. What are we going to do? The theme that Jesus continues to repeat over and over, John 14, 15, 16, 17, is, I have to go so that you can grow. I have to go. This is consistent with that answer. In order for you to grow in the works that you're going to do, I have to go. This is meant to comfort them. That's the whole point of this text. Apostles, I know you're worried about me going, but I have to go. And in going, not only will you do the works that I've been doing, but you'll do greater works. If you could generalize the statement, The little bit that we've done during this time that I've been here, that thing is going to pale in comparison to what's going to happen afterwards. But I have to go for that to happen. If I could sum this up, that's the explanation of this text. I don't think it's a lot more complicated than that. Jesus is comforting them, telling them, I have to go. But if I go, you'll be able to do things far beyond this little bit that we've done while I've been here. Okay, and then finally, he gives a statement that was also in David's, a version of this was in David's hard statement. Whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. He's talking about the power of prayer once he goes and how that power of prayer will serve them. Okay, that's the gist of my reading of this text, but I want to hone in on a couple of key words I think that are important. Maybe that will help us wrestle with the feelings that we'll have here, saying to ourselves, we do greater works than Jesus, right? I mean, let's just be honest, that's a challenge for us. Well, let's think about what Jesus said. The Father who dwells in me does his works, and then he says, believe on account of the works. Jesus described his ministry as a ministry filled with works, and he defined it as words, at least in part. There were other things too, but he defined it as words. And he says the works that Jesus performed created faith in those that witnessed them. You believe because you saw the works. You believe. Well, what works did Jesus do? And I think we've sort of teased that out a little bit. He certainly did miraculous works. But let me ask you another work that he did. How about the work of submission? When he submitted in the Garden of Gethsemane, submitted to the Father's will and went to the cross. How does that score in your works that Jesus did? Is that like healing a blind man? Well, when Jesus healed a blind man was healed. When Jesus submitted at the cross, the sin debt was paid. Be careful not to read this text and read the word works and just think miracles. Because if you are, you're missing it. This is talking about the entire scope of what Jesus did. The Father's will, everything, it's what he told you here. Everything it meant to be the Father's will, all those things that he did. His submission, his righteous living, the words that he said, the kind deeds that he did along the way, his miracles, all of them. But what he says is, those works were not my works. Jesus said those works were from the Father. It was the Father doing his works through me. Now that's going to be important for us because think about the works that we do. This greater works that we do, that creates a problem for us. Like, Trip, like, what are you going to march out there tomorrow and say, I'm doing better works than Jesus? Really? We're going to say that? You know why that bothers us? Because it feels like a proudful thing to say. It feels like something a narcissistic heathen would say. I'm doing greater works than Jesus. And the reason it feels that way is because we don't understand works. That's why. Jesus understood works. These were the works of the Father through him. That's what they were. They were the works of the Father through him. Jesus didn't beat the drum and say, look at the great works I've done. Jesus didn't walk up and down the streets and say, look at all the people I've healed. He didn't. He didn't brag about all the things he accomplished. Everything he did from a perspective of humility and consistently attributed them to the Father. Who is the power behind the works that you do? That's the question to answer. And when you begin to understand that, then it won't be hard at all to acknowledge that we are participating in works far greater than the works of the first century. The apostles tell us this, if we'll just listen. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 6. There are a variety of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. It's God performing the works in us. Ephesians 1:19, the immeasurable greatness of his power toward us who believe according to the working of his great might. It is God performing the works that we do, not me. It's God performing works through me, just like Jesus said. Ephesians 3:20, now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. You see that? It's the power at work within us. I've got nothing. I have nothing. I can be absolutely humble in what I say, that I've got nothing. And if there is any work that I accomplish, my elder brother John Barish used to say it, it is through God, speaking as the oracles of God, God working through us. That's how you can say we are part of something, a kingdom that is growing and is greater every day. And we can say it with humility because it's God's work. Philippians 2 verse 13, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do and to work for his good pleasure. Colossians 1:29, and I love this text. For this I toil. He uses a different word, and I don't remember. One of them is ergon, like ergonomic, and the other word is, pardon me, kinetic, I believe. It's another version of the word energy. For this I toil, struggling while his energy that he powerful works within me. So Paul acknowledges there's a toil that I participate, that I have to put into it, but the work is done by God. The work is accomplished by God. I'm toiling, God's doing. It's kind of how he's saying it. And then Hebrews 13 verse 20, and equip you with everything good that you may do his will. The New Testament, you cannot read the New Testament and walk away believing that you and I accomplish works on our own behalf. We don't. The works that we accomplish, yes, we toil, we struggle at them, but it is God working through us. Otherwise, they're not righteous works, are they? They are the new creature within us, the new creation. This new creation within us is accomplishing the works of God, just like Jesus said, the Father works through me. So when you think about it that way, that's really no problem at all. This is not a problem because it's God working. And Jesus told us that in the text. Jesus said that, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. He's telling us if you're going to do greater works, it's because God is performing. Now, the takeaway I want to get from that is, first of all, don't be so arrogant and conceited to think that you're the guy doing the works. If you're in the kingdom, it is God working through you. Because I've got nothing to offer. I don't. I really don't. I have nothing to offer. But God working through me can accomplish power. What did those texts say? Powerful things, mighty things. Jesus says greater things he can accomplish. That's what God can do. Okay. So over the last couple of months, I chased a rabbit trail on this text. Let me get a drink again. And this is a lesson 101 in study your text. I read this and I looked up the word for greater. And I said, you know, the word greater, and indeed the Greek word greater can be read in two different ways, qualitative or quantitative. In other words, greater works as in more works. Just more of the same thing, more quantity. And I said, oh, surely that's what Jesus meant. Because Jesus' works were sort of limited to Palestine, just that little bit of area. And indeed, with the spread of the kingdom, it went across Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, uttermost parts of the earth, around the world. There are greater quantity of works than what the works that Jesus did. Certainly that's what Jesus meant. And the word would allow that reading, that you could read that word that way. But the word also does mean qualitative. In other words, bigger and better and bolder and flashier and more impressive. It can mean that as well. So I said, all right, let me look at all the cases in the book of John and see how does John use that word. And Mike, this is where your study humbles you. Because I said, surely I'm going to find that John uses it this way. Well, you see how I usually use the yellow highlighting with the red glow around it to highlight all the times where a thing occurred. And I'll use a blue highlighting where like it didn't happen that way. Well, right here are all of the occasions where John used it the way that I was describing, which are none. He never used it that way, not once. John always used the word to describe qualitative. So after thinking incorrectly on this for some time, I said, okay, it's not quantity, is it? Stop trying to run away from what the Bible is saying. Jesus said greater works, and he meant qualitative. Bigger, better, bolder. Now, how can that be? How can that be? Well, one thing is it's not me, it's God. That's one. Second is, I want you to think about, as we begin to close, I want you to think about the trajectory of the kingdom and the works that were accomplished in the trajectory of the kingdom. Whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do. Jesus, yes, he established his kingdom. And the apostles opened the doors into the kingdom. And for the first 100 years, how did they say regarding Paul? Turned the world upside down. 2,000 years later, the world has been changed. And I don't mean a metaphor here. I mean the world is a different place. It's still sinful, but it's not the world it was 2,000 years ago. And you pick your subject. You pick your subject. It's like Wes covered on our first session in this group of statements. The kingdom has suffered violence. That's not a passive thing. The kingdom brought change, if you want to read it that way. The kingdom punched through the wall of Satan and conquered Satan and is conquering Satan in this world. The guys were talking a day or so ago about idolatry. Do you realize idolatry as an institution is relegated to just a couple of places in the world now? 2,000 years ago, it ruled the world. Everybody worshiped an idol. Not now. It's still out there, but not like it was. Pick your subject. Pick your subject. Battles between the races. The Apostle Paul said 2,000 years ago, we are all one in Christ. And now 2,000 years later, it's pretty given among anybody that accepts, the battle still goes on, yes. But the world in large part has acknowledged that we can all be one, the singularity of the human race. Women's rights, education, health care, you pick your subject. Workers' rights. You just go down the list. And those didn't just show up from nowhere. Those came about by the influences of Christianity. Doctors go to work and cure diseases. Teachers work with children and teach children that otherwise would not even be considered teachable. The children with challenges and things like that. All of these things found their genesis in people serving Christ. That's where they got their start. Now, is the world challenging Christianity today? Yeah, and has for 2,000 years. Satan's fighting back. He's fighting back with a fervor. But know this, every day when you serve in the kingdom of God, we are part of a movement that is busting through the wall, that is greater than the things that happened in the first century and continues to be greater. The single most important event in all of human history and continues to redefine lives every day. Every day, lives are redefined by it. Jesus was right. Greater works than these for those who believe. Now that just leaves the question for you, what are you doing? Are you sitting in the sofa, or are you about the Father's business, helping your neighbor, doing good to mankind, demonstrating the love of Christ, sharing the word, ministering to the gospel, doing the things that you can do? What part are you doing? The also works and the greater works. We've covered a lot of really hard sayings, and it's been a really enjoyable. I've loved the way that the teachers have worked through the text, sometimes offered 2 or 3 different ways that people read the text. It's been really, really informative. The process itself has been very good. But I think it was fitting that Jonathan put this last one as the one that we would finally end with. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to understand, but really not. Jesus established a kingdom, and you and I are part of a world-changing kingdom that continues on a trajectory to a new heavens and a new earth, the greatest of all, of new life for all that are a part of the new kingdom. And we're on that trajectory. Yeah, it's a hard saying, a little bit hard to get, and it's hard to do. But here we are tonight, doing greater works. So, pick up your hammer and get busy. We have works to do, and they're incredible things that they accomplish here in this world for the kingdom. Hope you've enjoyed the study this evening. It's been my pleasure to bring it to you. If we can assist you this evening in obeying the gospel, we'd love to do that. If we can help you with prayers, we'd love to do that too. If you will come forward, have a seat on the front while we sing the song that's been selected.